Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, April 19th, 2017 public session of the Halton District School Board. I'd like to welcome everyone who is here tonight, including those at home. I would like to acknowledge that even though you'll view some empty seats behind the trustees, most superintendents are here. They're just out of the room at the moment and will be back, except we have regrets from Superintendent Salmini and Superintendent Etoff. I would like to remind everyone to turn off whatever kind of gadget they have that may make noise. Remember that this meeting is video voice recorded and we are being live streamed out to the web. So say hi. The Halton District School Board acknowledges and thanks the First Peoples of this territory and other Indigenous people for the use of this land in order for us to continue our work today. So the first item we have is approval of the agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Trustee L. Harrison, seconded by Trustee Gray. Is there any discussion on our agenda tonight? Seeing none, all those in favor? Trustee L. Harrison? And Trustee Haj-Ali, could you vote for the approval of the agenda, please? There we go. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. So we have no presentations or delegations tonight, so I'm looking for a motion to accept the minutes from the regular board meeting of April the 5th, 2017, moved by Trustee Gerbentz, seconded by Trustee Reynolds. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. So we now are up to business transacted in private session. Did we have any items transacted in private session tonight?
None for this evening.
Thank you. So we will now move on to the order paper. Do we have any questions or comments on the order paper tonight? Seeing none. We will move along to our action items. And our first action item is 3.4.1 feedback re director's job description and executive limitations and delegation of authority processes. Director Miller, report 17048 on page 14 of your board package. Director Miller.
I don't really have any comments. It's there. I think there's something before the board that I'll let the trustees speak.
Thank you. Trustee Collard.
Thank you. We had some conversation at Committee of the Whole last week regarding some trustees wondering or having concerns that perhaps because we aren't lawyers, we might not fully understand the implications that might arise from the changes to the executive limitations. And so I put together a motion which I have shared with everyone. I'm not going to read the whereases, I'm just going to read the motion part. Be it resolved that the Board of Trustees obtain a written legal opinion from Miller Thompson regarding the proposed changes to the Director's job description and executive limitations and delegation of authority policies, and that Miller Thompson be provided with copies of the current and proposed Director's job description and executive limitations and delegation of authority policies, and that the Director of Education's contract be given the opportunity to confer with the Board of Trustees to discuss their findings. Be it further resolved that the decision regarding the changes to the director's job description and executive limitations and delegation of authority policies be deferred until such time as the legal opinion has been obtained and any recommendations resulting from it have been discussed by the Board of Trustees and the Director of Education. And I so move. I have spoken with Director Miller about this, and I believe it's very prudent for us to be getting this legal opinion, especially in the current climate. It protects the director, it protects the Board of Trustees, and most importantly, it protects the Halton District School Board.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Through you, Chair Amos, to Trustee Collard and all trustees. As Trustee Collard mentioned, we did have a conversation about this, and I support this. I think it's wise to do so.
Thank you. So this has been moved by Trustee Collard. I'm just thinking, it's already something that's on the books, so this is a substitute motion. We don't need to waive the rules. So could I have a seconder for the motion? Trustee Harvey Hope. Discussion. Trustee Gray.
Sorry, I had indicated a request to speak before this motion was put on the floor. So I'll go back on the speakers list after we deal with this motion. I have a question about the actual paper itself. Is that appropriate to ask it at this time?
I would suggest that maybe you ask it at this time because it does relate to what is going to be forwarded to the lawyer if this passes.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to ask a question under number 5, delegation of authority. In this section, number 5, it talks about the Director of Education being able to make decisions during the summer months with regards to awarding tenders for capital projects. Now, obviously, that there would be a money sign connected to that. There doesn't seem to be any suggestion of an upper limit in this. I'm wondering if the upper limit is then referred to in 3.11, where it talks about the director being able to make a purchase or commitment up to the amount of $50,000 without requiring approval. So I'm just wanting to connect the two. Are they connected, or is there any upper limit under number 5 in the delegation of authority?
Superintendent Cullen's trying to give a response here
Through the chair.
on behalf of the director.
Well, just a little history on where the summer delegation came from. In a lot of cases, when we're leading up to the construction of a new school, we've brought a report like that to the board several times. So the LTAP, the appointment of architect, the then selection of contractor and design. So we go all through all those stages. Once it goes through the purchasing department and the tender is to be awarded, in some cases that could fall in the summer months. It could be as much as a $13, $14 million elementary school or a $25 million secondary school. So the dollar limit would be restrictive for that purpose if that's what the intent was. And it was one of the intents of putting that motion in place, that the board didn't have to be called back together in the summer months to award what I would classify as an item that they were very knowledgeable and aware of, and it was just the next step in the process. And what it did is allowed us to start construction as early as possible. So that was sort of the driver behind that. So a dollar limit on it would be kind of counterproductive as far as that particular one goes.
And I would add, we've taken note of it, and it's one of the questions that we will ask.
Thank you. Trustee Harvey Hope.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I thank Trustee Collard for this motion, and was one of the ones that was concerned that we hadn't had legal opinion on it. Also, there are some other adjustments or suggestions or questions that I will be forwarding to the director. As I had mentioned before at the Committee of the Whole, he kind of has his plate full until at least Friday morning. So I didn't want to add to that. One of them being certain line items in that director's policy are hopelessly out of date in that it's still based on 20 years ago numbers as far as budget items to be allowed for. Also, the thing about spending money up to $50,000 doesn't take into account the new purchasing rules of anything over 2,000, so that also has not been adjusted in there. And there's some other pieces that are, because the original document was just taken from the negative language and put in the positive language, some of them aren't exactly opposite. And so there have been some notations. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to sort of tack on to the discussion with the lawyers, just to make sure we've got the wording right, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is just with respect to what is the mechanism for providing additional comments? Is it tonight or another mechanism? So that, in other words, the lawyer looks at it once in an efficient and an effective way?
Through Chair Amos to Trustee L. Harrison. Yeah, I think it'd be better to provide the lawyer with a more fulsome picture. So I think if we put some kind of deadline where you provide the comments to send them to Gail, and Gail will send it all off to the lawyer, what would be an appropriate timeline for you guys to get those comments in? Monday? Monday, 4? Sure. So let's do it that way. I think that's a good idea.
But you need to, I believe, share them with all trustees so they're aware of the questions you're asking. And seeing no further speakers on this topic, all those in favor? Just a sec. Previous set. There it is. That passes unanimously. Thank you. So now we will move to communications to the board. And always a highlight, our student trustee reports. Trustee Metropolitansky and Trustee Hajali.
Thank you. The first thing that we just have to remind you guys about is that the student trustee election is next week, so it's next Tuesday. It's the 25th. Beyond that, yesterday we had a student senate meeting. The next student senate meeting, the one next week doesn't count because it's the election, will be in May 16th, which is like 3 days before our Halton Youth Leadership Symposium on the 19th. We'll talk about that in a second. But we had our meeting yesterday. We just have a couple of issues to pass on to make you guys aware about. For the elementary portion, there were two major things that came up. The first one was last board meeting I brought up that the grade 8 students talked about how for French they didn't feel it was preparing them for grade 9. We have more specific issues that they brought up in terms of like very specific things that they were talking about in the curriculum that they felt could be changed, and we can pass that on to the committee that's responsible for that, and we'll do that. The second thing was this has been an issue that's been brought up for a number of weeks in a row now. The elementary students are really pressing on equity, and just they've pointed out that right now the climate in their schools isn't the best for not only issues among students, so things like racism, homophobia, sexism, but also just ensuring that staff are well equipped to deal with those issues, because they know that the vast majority of the staff that we have in our schools are great. They've just had some less than ideal occasions, which are obviously going to happen, but they really want us to push for having equity be on the minds of teachers and the way that we're training teachers and all staff, and they just want a big push for that. So that's what we heard from elementary students.
From our secondary aspect, there was one big issue that kind of arose, and that was to do with just drugs within their high school. And the high school senators agreed that it's kind of like a well-known problem that there are drug issues at their schools. And the senators kind of asked the board in the hopes to kind of address to see what solutions they can come up with or what they can do beyond the Bravo program that was previously the DARE program that exists for grade 6 students. excuse me. So we know that it's largely kind of like a police or correctional facility kind of issue, but we do believe that there's something that the board can do, take a greater role, and Director Miller recommended creating a committee of students to kind of brainstorm ideas, and that perhaps the board could help us communicate with the different kind of correctional facilities like the police, like our other partners in the police. And then there are other suggestions as well, like the senators wanted maybe perhaps moving the Bravo program from grade 6 to kind of later in the years when they start getting influenced by these different things, so like maybe grade 8 or even 7. So other than that, so yeah, we began just creating the group right now. That's what we're kind of gearing towards. Other than that, HYLS, which is our Halton Youth Leadership Symposium, is on May 19th. So that is our confirmed date. We've signed the contract agreement and everything, and we're just currently drafting up a letter to the elementary principals, letting them know that they can send up to 10 students per school to kind of come to our event, and that's what we're working on right now.
Yeah, just to clarify that, what we've usually done for HYLS is we just leave it open, so it's first come, first serve. You sign up on the website, and what's happened though in the past, we've seen that there are a couple of elementary schools where there'll be one elementary school and like 60 kids from that one school just sign up, which is absolutely okay. It's okay to make it like a couple of classes go as a field trip to this, but we wanted to make sure that more students from a greater number of elementary schools could get to go. So what we're thinking of doing is sending out a letter to elementary principals and saying that they can choose 10 students from their school. I think of the 10 students that will be chosen that are probably most likely the ones who would get the most out of that conference. We think that we would prefer having a larger number of schools represented in that sense.
Thank you. And I think there's a couple comments or questions for you. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you very much, through the chair. Thank you very much for your report. I know that recently a number of parents have approached me about drugs in schools as well and their concern in that regard. So I think it's very timely and on people's minds. So it's really interesting to hear that it's also on the minds of students. And personally, if there's any way that I can support the group in that initiative, I'd be happy to be part of it.
Through Chair Amos to two student trustees and Trustee L. Harrison. Actually, I was there last evening, and I suggested, as opposed to a committee, we call it a task force. It's got a little more cachet and it's a little more different level, that we create a task force of students, probably staff, and Associate Director Bo will get that started, and we'll look at it. I think it's important that we hear those, because I heard those voices last night because I was there. So,
Thank you. Trustee Gerbrands.
Thank you, through you, Chair Amos. I was just wondering if you're including some sort of agenda with the letter so that principals can kind of understand who their target students might be.
Yeah, so we'll definitely do that. The way that it's structured right now is we have a draft agenda for it. Is there'll be 2 keynote speeches, and then the rest of it is student-run workshops that we get student senators to run. We're trying really hard to make them. This is the first year that it's going to be elementary only, the conference. So we just polled the elementary students constantly on what issues they want to have discussed. It ranges from like a high school survival guide, which they all wanted, to some of them just said we want a world issues workshop where we can just talk about issues. So we're having the students themselves run those, and we'll make that clear to the principals for sure.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers, I'd like to thank you very much for your report and wish you good luck in the election next week, and I hope that it goes smoothly as well. Okay, so we are now up to information items, and including notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion tonight? Seeing none, we will then move up to our action items for May 3rd. I guess we don't have anything happening May 3rd. Not yet. So we'll move on to our information items for tonight. The capital update, Superintendent Cullen, report 17057 on page 24 of your board package. Welcome, Superintendent Cullen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it wasn't all that long ago I did provide an update, but this puts us back on schedule with the regular dates for these. You'll notice in the package this week, we still have an update on Martin Street. It was actually there today. The second floor looks amazing. The original wall, the facade, is still standing. That's a good thing. And lots of activity on the site, so they're doing very well. Well, that was the wall we had to retain for the heritage vintage part of the building, and it is still standing, so that's a good thing. The other item you'll note is that we've added Oakwood to the list. Oakwood, although not a addition or capital project of the typical caliber that you've seen, has some fairly significant things going on in there because we're actually doing a childcare under one of the ministry programs in addition to some other projects. So when we bundle them all together, it's a fairly sizable project, and that has now started. And hopefully by our next update, you will see a summary of all of the portable locations that are being proposed for September. So planning has brought that to admin council once already. It was just too early to add in here. It's being vetted one more time, and when that's done, you'll get an indication as to how many portables are going to which of the sites, and that will be reflected on the next capital update. You have to take any questions related to this chart or any other projects on the system.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report, and it's exciting to see that Oakwood's in here now. I was wondering if you could comment on the nature of the abatement work.
Abatement is the technical term for removal or treatment of asbestos. So what actually occurs prior to the general contractors starting what most people would describe as conventional construction, there's actually an abatement process takes place wherein our environmental consultant goes in, identifies the nature of the asbestos, where it is, what type it is, and how it has to be dealt with. And then a contractor that specializes in that particular field comes in, and there's several different levels of protection that get applied depending on what type of asbestos is there. In some cases, it can be in floor tile. Very simple to deal with. In other cases, it can be a sprayed on fireproofing material, more complex, and therefore has to be contained in a negative air containment type area. It looks almost like a clean room when you get finished with it. So depending on the very nature of what's going on, that will be applied to the site. So the abatement takes place first, and then the regular demolition and construction follows.
Thank you. Vice Chair Graves.
Thank you very much through you, Chair, to Superintendent Cullen. On the report, I noticed that some of the items are sort of grayed. I noticed that bold indicates a change. I was just wondering what the grade is. And then one of the items that is grayed, I was wondering if you might be able to elaborate on just a little bit. For Southwest Milton number 1 high school, the developers are delayed on the zoning and plan of the subdivision. It requires a 4-month approval process. That's my question on that is, does it always take exactly 4 months, or is that expected to go longer, or what are the factors they're dependent on, and how might I help? I think is where I'm going with that.
Through the chair to the vice chair, at this point, that is probably one of our biggest issues, and we're estimating that 4 months. It's an issue right now around the town and the developers don't have the site in a ready-to-build-on condition, which means it's not registered, it's not serviced. There's a whole bunch of those things that have yet to occur. In our conversations with the town, they're aware that we're anxious to get on the site because of our proposed opening date. They're also aware that they don't have the region of Halton approval for servicing yet. So there's a lot of irons in the fire at the moment as we're working on this particular one. And the 4 months is strictly an estimate at this point. It's the typical time frame. If it becomes necessary for us to make it a political issue, we will certainly bring everybody to the table as quickly as we can and do that. Certainly staff are aware, and I'm sure they've made their political counterparts aware that we're very concerned about this one at this point in time. But I think at this point I can say everybody's doing the best they can within the parameters of their job description and controls at this point in time. But we certainly have to keep you aware that it's not a green light situation in the regular format that it should be at this stage. And sorry, the bold font is for changes, as you've noticed. Anything that we have changed from a previous one. I'm not sure what you're referring to as gray. What is? Are they shaded? They're not shaded on the version I have, so not shady, shaded. So yeah.
Oh, that's okay. I just clicked somewhere. I'm looking at the electronic version. I think just some of the ones that were bolded might have been recent, and they were just still highlighted in the document. So
typically, all we do is the bold to draw your attention to a change or an update. So.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers to this topic, I'd like to thank you very much for the update, and we look forward to your next one. So our next item is the item 4.2.2, review of safety risks for students with medical and/or mobility needs. Superintendent Sonnefeld, report 17060 on page 26 of your board package. Welcome, Superintendent Sonnefeld.
Thank you and good evening. Through the chair to trustees. The report before you, I'll apologize for the timing of this. You'll notice in the warrant that the date of the original motion was 2014, and so this is some work that I'll say I inherited from my predecessor, and you'll know that we have had a number of other things going on in student services, and are pleased to bring this to you finally. So this review has been going on for a number of months, and you can see there quite a bit of work has gone into this in terms of the methodology. You can see the range of stakeholder groups that we heard from, and then you can see the research findings there. I'll draw your attention to the first item there around the accident report data that highlights that our students with mobility and medical safety, medical needs, there's no statistical difference in accident reports for those students over others. You can see the range of training that's involved for staff, the value on that training that's been reported by a number of those groups, and I'll draw your attention then down to numbers 6 and 7 in the findings around the feedback from parents and students. And I think there's the feedback there really, I think, echoes and supports what we heard earlier from the various staff groups, that by and large our students and parents feel that their children are quite safe in our schools, in our programs. So there were some good recommendations that came from this review. You can see there some things that we want to continue doing and some other areas that we're going to focus on. So I think there were some good recommendations that came that way. But by and large, what we learned, and I think what was affirmed here, is that our students with mobility and medical needs are well looked after in our schools. So this report was shared at SEAC, and we had some feedback there. But to be honest, not a lot of questions. Some around transportation that we talked about. But by and large, this was well received at SEAC as well. So I'll stop there and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. There are a couple comments or questions. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Superintendent Sonnefeld. First, I'd like to express my gratitude to the EAs, staff, teachers, and administrators who have the training, the skills, and the compassion to be able to support our most vulnerable student population. Secondly, the report has clearly indicates a lot of very positive findings, and that our staff are adequately trained and prepared and supported. But often such reviews do allude or point out weaknesses in our system. And I'm wondering if through this review we did identify areas that we were less satisfied with, that require further attention, resources, and support.
Through the chair to Trustee Oliver, there are some very specific feedback around very specific situations that did come out that we are following up on. If you can appreciate, this was a summary of the research findings. If you look down at the recommendations on that last page, The areas, that we thought, there's some good feedback here around some areas for us to grow in. One for sure is around mental health, that, we know that this is an expanding area of need, and staff are saying quite clearly we need more training in this. So for sure, mental health. Student independence. We're talking about this often, and knowing that this is the end goal we're looking for all of our students with special needs. We're trying to provide all the supports they need along the way, but that goal, at whatever point in time, knowing that, sort of our cutoff time of our opportunities for influence are at 18 or 21, whatever that age is that they're leaving. So that's the latest, but as soon as we can, we're always trying to move students towards independence and provide the learning and support for that. So staff know that, but are saying we need more help about how to help our students get there. So that's an area for sure. And that specificity I was mentioning earlier, we heard staff say we're receiving some really good general training for medical and mobility needs. More specificity of that training for individual students would help as well. Sometimes for students with a dual diagnosis or multiple diagnosis, we heard that also. So those were some areas. And then the other one I'll highlight, or two, is around communication with parents. That parents, even though our feedback was pretty positive around their involvement with planning and communication, so we still think we could do a better job. That even though we might have 80 or 85%, I'm not, there you can see some of the numbers there where parents feel that they've had some good involvement. Well, there's another 15% who don't, right? So we need to improve in an area like that. And then we know that we can't do this work alone, but in partnership with our other community agencies or community partners. That's an area that sometimes we really do well, but other areas that we could improve, that we could be more consistent there. So those are some of the key areas where we said, here's some good learning for us from this review.
Thank you. Trustee Collard.
Thank you. I asked this question at SEAC, but I'm going to ask it here because we have a broader audience able to hear the answer. It's with respect to BMS versus UMAB. UMAB is understanding and managing aggressive behavior, and BMS is behavior management system. And we are transitioning from UMAB to BMS. And I've had some concerns expressed to me about some of our students that are at this, in this group with the highest risks for safety, and about the training for staff on this and how it would be implemented in that area of our schools. And I was wondering if you would please just speak to that concern. Thanks.
Through the chair to Trustee Collard, you all know that we're in a 2-year implementation of BMS training for all staff, so nearing the end of year 1. We have intentionally not trained staff at schools with CPP, with that program yet, partly because we want our trainers, we have about 40 trainers now, who we want them to really grow their expertise in running the training. And secondly, because as we get to know BMS better, we have a better understanding of for whom this training will really works well to help us support which students, but where there are specific students, types of needs that we need to provide more training. So we've been growing that knowledge and expertise as well through this year. So as we approach year 2 and getting ready to train schools with the CPPs, we know that that training will work well for the vast majority of those students. I'll remind you that BMS is a much more of a focus on being proactive and being preventative, so we don't get ourselves into those situations where kids become aggressive. And so it's much more about learner profiles, understanding environmental factors, social factors, triggers, those kinds of things. So that focus is then leads us to be less hands-on, which is what we want to be as well, because we know that the hands-on can be a trigger for some students. So there are some students for whom we need to be able to do more blocks and holds and those kinds of things than BMS trains us in. And so we are for those students where we need to, we are providing very specific training that's more than BMS. We're drawing upon some of those things that we used to do in UMAB and some other things that are very specific that we know that student needs to stay safe, and for staff and other students to be safe as well. So I think some of the concerns that you may have heard, I think that there's a bit of the unknown for some CPP staff. They're saying we're hearing that we can't do this or we can only do that. How does that work how am I that going to work for that student? So we're I guess we're trying to send the reassurance that don't worry, you're going to get the training you need to support that student.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Trustee Harvey Hope.
Thank you. Through you to, actually probably to Superintendent Cullen, but I'll direct it to Superintendent Zonville first. I noticed that one of the things that was reported was the increasing amounts of equipment is making storage a challenge. And just wondered how we were going to incorporate that or update the design guidelines, as well as on a interrelated topic in that, the FDK, when originally some of the classrooms were built, they weren't built with enough storage space for the things one uses in FDK. And then when you add in the other items that are used or the space that's required for children with mobility needs, it gets very complicated as far as space requirements. So I'm just wondering if we have an action plan for how the recommendations from this particular review might flow into the facilities area in order to maybe add a couple square feet of the next set of buildings built if that's required.
Through the chair to Trustee Harvey Hope, Mark's been one of our best tenants when it comes to real estate as of late. I think we've all acknowledged the size of the equipment, the volume of the equipment, and in particular when we're starting to put groups of students together, the washroom requirements, there's a significant impact on that. So we've been working with the group on those design changes. We've certainly been looking at it for the new high school in particular in Milton, and we've looked at it for the new elementary schools as well. So it is a factor in what we're doing. One of the issues, as you know, is the funding formula is a capped, limited item. So we really have to be somewhat aware that as much as we could make a really good rationale for lots and lots of space for many, many of our programs, it has to come from someplace else. So there's a bit of a trade-off in some of there. So we're aware of that as well.
Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you. Through the chair, I have a question, really a comment and a question regarding a comment that was put in the parents' survey, particularly with respect to the concern or the parent concern of the lack of consistency in the personnel assignments and I want to say the knowledge of the learning profile of that personnel member. Certainly having I want to say a rotating door for our students certainly negatively affects their learning environment and their ability to meet the student needs. So my question is, what is our current practice, and this could be perhaps a question for HR, what is our current practice for evaluating what is happening in terms of job performance accountability in this particular concern, that there is a rotating staff and that perhaps the assignment may not be fully versed into the student profile?
Through the chair, to Trustee Reynolds, just make sure I'm clear on your question. So when you talk about rotating staff, are you referring to staff for whom that is their assignment, let's say for a one school year, and then another staff member comes in the next year, that, or are you talking within the school year itself? So the rotation, so I just, if I can clarify by role, so for in an elementary program, for example, if you're talking about life skills in elementary, that teacher would be their assignment for the year. EAs, there may be some if you want to call it rotation, scheduling of staff within that class. And we try to do a careful balance there. We know that with that goal, as you heard me mention earlier, always towards independence for students, we know that for students to have the same staff member work with them day in, day out, can often result in dependence as opposed to independence. And then the other problem that we come across is that if we only have one staff member working with that student and then that staff member is away for whatever reason, training, illness, or whatever, that can be very challenging for that student because they haven't had experience with other staff. So we try to strike the balance of consistency with also some, if you want to call it rotation or variation in staff working with that student, because our experience has shown that is healthy for that student to have, as opposed to one all day, every day. Maybe through the course of the week, there are maybe 2 or 3 that work with that student, and that helps that student have confidence that, hey, I can work with a number of people and trust a number of adults and be confident when this person isn't there, another person can be. And I think you see mentioned in the report that a challenge has been identified by staff are the lack of staff on some days. We have unfilled vacancies amongst our EA group, which can be very challenging. And so staff have to have plans to say, so maybe the 2 or 3 that work with that student, all of them are absent that day, or can't work because they have work restrictions where their physical abilities can't work with that student. In which case, we have to have a number of staff who are familiar with that student profile, know what that student's routine looks like, and are able to support them. So we try and make sure we have a range of staff that can work with that student and just support them, so that no time are we putting that student in a difficult spot or really having to change their routine too much. Because that is difficult for that student too. So I hope you can hear me saying that it's a careful balance of what all that looks like. And we know that can, lead to some questions on the part of parents, but we try to help them understand that.
Thank you. Trustee Gray.
Yes, thank you through the chair to Superintendent Zonfeld. Under recommendation number 3, it talks about further develop strategies to address the ongoing challenge of unfilled vacancies for absent EAs. What are the current strategies that we have in place now, and do you have any idea about some of the strategies that might be coming into play in the future?
So are you asking this from the standpoint of in the classroom? Sorry, through the chair, Trustee Gray.
I guess it's more about the hiring and trying to get a pool of enough of a pool of EAs so that we don't have jobs left unsubscribed, or that we don't have EAs at the last minute canceling on jobs,
right.
And not making, say, the trip to Halton Hills, for example.
Right. Yeah, you probably have heard this is a pronounced problem in the north sometimes too. So we have a few things in process. Number one, we've examined trying to make sure we really have a good handle on our unfilled vacancy rate. We've looked at it as a whole board, also by area, even drilled down to some specific schools to try and understand why some of those numbers are heightened in some areas more than others. Number two, I think it's going to be launched. I'm just looking for Superintendent McFadden. It's going to be launched, I believe, next week. We have a survey going out to all of our occasional EAs, supply EAs, asking them questions really to try to get to understand why aren't they taking the work all the time. Because when we look at the size of that supply pool and look at the number of, the size of the entire EA group as a proportion, it should be big enough. But what we're trying to understand is it that they're on a number of supply pools across a number of boards and therefore, taking jobs in other places? Is it because they don't want to work in certain programs or certain schools? Is it that they have other jobs that they have commitments to? Is it they don't like the work? Obviously we've tried to word it very positively, but we're trying to understand in the end why is it that you're not taking, because we also have looked at what's the rate of how many jobs they are taking, because they could work every day, but many of them are not. So why not? So we're really trying to drill down to understand what do we need to change in terms of what's happening in schools. Are there other things we need to do in terms of who's on that supply list to ensure that those people are taking jobs quite regularly, right? They're active, thank you. So that's the purpose of that survey. We're also every day looking at where are the hot spots in our schools. So let's say you have a school, like Georgetown, for example, where I don't know the number there. Let's say they have 30 or 40 or 50 EAs because of food school and CPP, et cetera. If they have a number, let's say they have 5 unfilled vacancies and we say, wow, that's a lot, then we have our itinerant pool where we specifically say, okay, we're going to send one of our itinerant folks there that day to try and drop that number down. So we're trying to address that as well. One of the challenges that we had, we've also looked at compensation and done a comparison with other boards. So we have an awareness there of what that looks like. We probably sit about mid-pack in that, but a challenge is that we couldn't touch it in terms of the central bargaining, right? All compensation was addressed centrally and was basically status quo except for the standard percentages that you saw. So if we were lagging behind a neighboring board in compensation, we couldn't address it. So not to say that's the only reason why staff are taking jobs or not, but we know that it is a factor for some. So I'm trying to think if there's other. I know that we've come together about this because this is a significant challenge for a number of schools on a regular basis, right? A number of principals start their day every morning saying, okay, how many EAs are we short today? And away they go, scheduling, adjusting schedules and routines to try and make sure that kids are well supported and covered through the course of their day. So we know it's significant, and it's top of mind in terms of the work between student services and HR, trying to drill down to why, what's the issue here.
The director has something to add as well.
And just through your chair, Mr. Trustee Gray, you may see something in in our recommendations around budget that helps address this a little bit. Itinerant EAs helps in this process because they're not assigned to a school, they're assigned to vacancies. So hopefully you'll see some of that, as not the solution, but part of the solution. So.
Thank you.
I didn't know if I could say that. Thank you.
You couldn't, I could. No. Well, budget's a public process, so.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers, thank you very much for your report, Superintendent Zonneveld. So we'll now move on. Oh, don't move. The Learning Center referrals update. Superintendent Zonneveld, report 17058 on page 29 of your board package. When you're ready.
Thank you. This is a follow-up report to one that came earlier to trustees, where you asked that we, I'll say monitor as opposed to track students over that are on our we're on our wait list to enter the Learning Center, and I appreciate the trustees were concerned about how we would be supporting those students through this school year. So you can see that we've been monitoring those students quite closely over the past 6 or so months, and you can see there, starting with who are those students. So that's in that geography, identification, and programming section. Then you can see there's quite an extensive list of the kinds of supports. This is a summary, but those are the types of supports that they've been receiving through the course of the year. And then a bit of a monitoring of how those students have been doing. You can see in the achievement section. I think there's some pretty strong results there you can see in that achievement section. And then in the next steps are some good learning that's come to us through this monitoring for us, for staff, of the types of things that we will continue to do for students. And you may recall me talking to you back in the fall about how this is how we know that these students are doing well, but this is really not intended just for those students, but for all students in all schools, the type of things that we'll continue to do, because in the end we want as many students as possible with special needs to be served in a regular class in their home school. So some of the actions that we're taking and some of the learning that we've had through this monitoring. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And there are some comments and questions on this. Trustee Collard.
Thank you very much for this report. I just wanted to thank you for your commitment to ensuring that these students received the supports that they needed in order to be successful in their school year, and I just wanted to express my appreciation. Thank you.
Sorry, if I could mention, I should have said that this report also went to SEAC and had honestly not many questions. I think they appreciated the monitoring as well, but they, SEAC did have a chance for questions and comments also. Thanks.
Thank you. Vice Chair Graves.
Thank you. Yes, similar thanks here. There's a good sort of divide here between the focus on these students who had been referred, but also the greater piece of learning for all, so that more students can benefit from this learning. And I particularly like the next steps piece, and then the part that what was learned from this and what do we take forward from it. So I appreciate all the work that was done on this portfolio over the past year. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Director Miller.
Thanks, Chair Amos. I just have a couple of comments about this report and the previous report around safety. And I want to thank Superintendent Zonnefeld and his department. The report before this one on the learning centers is really a good news report, I think, that as some of the trustees have expressed, some of our most vulnerable kids feel safe. The parents feel that they're safe when they send their kids off to school. And I would like you to convey that to the entire student services staff, because nothing measures a society better than how we support and treat those that are the most vulnerable. So as a director, it makes me proud to think that we do that. And also on the Learning Center update, I want to thank your staff for earnestly looking at this and saying, how can we continue to support these kids at the same level they were supported, and even better than what they were supported. And finally, I'd just like to thank the trustees for pushing us on both those reports. I think had you not pushed us, they may not be in the public domain, and people may not know the good work that we do. So I think it's important that trustees continue to push us that way, and we appreciate that, because I think if we're not pushed, you get no report, and the public's not aware of the great things that we do, and the great work that our staff does to support kids with students with special needs and kids with challenges. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your report. A lot of hard work went into this, and we had to echo some of the statements. We know that a lot of people are aware and on top of making sure that these vulnerable students are looked after, so thank you very much. So our next item is the board report update. Director Miller, report 17059 on page 31 of your board package. Director Miller.
Thank you, Chair Amos. There's a few changes. As we mentioned, I can't remember whether I mentioned the last board meeting or committee of the whole. I think it was a committee of the whole, a special board meeting May 31st. But I can't remember if I did it at the board or a committee of the whole, but it was committee of the whole. So that's in there now, and we've moved a few items into there. In particular, the most significant one would be, well, they're all significant, but budget would be there for a May 31st date, and then for information, and then for action, and then action on June 21st. So there's a longer period of time in between than normal around the budget process, but I think it's appropriate given that the challenges the Board of Trustees will be faced with beginning May 17th with the Burlington PAR report, and the deliberations that you will have to do. There's a couple of other changes that we've just made this evening that aren't on there, and that's school bell time change requests and transportation policy exemptions. They're currently scheduled for May 7th. One was scheduled for May 1st, and one was scheduled for May 17th. We've moved them both to May 31st. 31st. Let me take questions in a sec, and then, or is it specifically around that?
Well,
okay.
We know that is a special board meeting, but we can have whatever we want on that agenda.
Yeah, just around the school bell time change request, I was kind of surprised it's been delayed by 4 weeks. Can you just let us know the reason for the delay?
Sure, through your chair, Amos, to Trustee Collard. The reason really is related to the work of the Burlington PAR on May 17th. And we've spoken with the manager of HSTS. So you're right, it's not ideal, but I think we may not get through all the work. So.
Thank you.
You can continue now.
I think that's it. The rest of the changes were bolded, but as you'll see, we still have a fair number on June 7th. And that may be a challenge as well. But I think we have to be a little bit fluid at this point around that, and leave it where it is at the moment. There's 4 for June 7th, Community Partnership Report, or the LTAP, Spec Ed Plan, Operational Plan, Capital Update, our capital priorities, I should say, pardon, and the PAR. So there may be some movement there as well, but I think we remain a bit fluid at the moment to just see where this goes. Okay? Thanks.
D. Harvey Hope.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, the ones that have 2 dates on them that aren't normally action items. So like the operational plan targets strategies, June 7th, June 21st.
Action.
They are actions?
Operational plans, action.
Okay, so that's for the approval of, okay.
Yeah.
And the capital update, capital plans is for, the update would be information, but the plan would be
And that's the
approval.
priorities, yeah.
Okay, I got you now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers to this topic, thank you for your report.
You're welcome.
So we're now up to admin procedure update. Director Miller, report 17056 on page 34 of your board package. Director Miller.
And there are 3 admin procedures, and they were all minor changes. They were just revising the date change, a revision in the date change. They came from Executive Officer McFadden. So.
Thank you. And seeing no comments or questions, thank you for that. So we are now up to the committee reports. Do we have any committee reports tonight? Trustee Gray.
Thank you very much. The audit committee met last week, and thanks go to trustee committee members, Trustee Graves and Harvey Hope, and also Superintendent Veerman and staff for their work at that meeting. I'd also like to extend a special thanks to Trustee Collard for attending this meeting and providing some assistance with it. The committee worked their way through the external audit plan, the regional internal audit plan, the audit committee terms of reference, and the policy for designating non-audit services by the external auditor. A report from the audit committee will be brought forward to a future board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Gray. Trustee Harvey Hope.
Thank you. Just wanted to thank the equity team, the Equity and Inclusive Steering Committee. Can't remember the name, sorry. We're included in a professional learning opportunity last week, and it was very informative. The morning was about Islamophobia, and unfortunately we didn't get to go to the afternoon session. I was in audit committee that afternoon, but it was all about religious literacy, so that would have been interesting as well. So I just wanted to thank for the opportunity, and it was very informative and timely. So thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Collard.
Yes, I just wanted to inform trustees that OPSPA Board of Directors will be meeting Friday and Saturday, and that the OPSPA AGM is from June 8th to 11th this year in Collingwood.
Thank you. Trustee Daniele.
Thank you. Also on the OPSPA update, executive had a phone call today to look at policy resolutions from other boards and to make recommendations to Board of Directors. There are a fair number of them that might be coming, so I would suggest on an upcoming agenda, we make some room for the OPSPA AGM to determine the voting on the AGM itself and the policy resolutions.
And if you could forward us that information so we know which agenda to include that on, that would be.
And I absolutely will. Right now, it's just in the exec's hands.
Yep.
It'll go to Board of Directors this weekend, and then I'm sure that Trustee Collard will forward it.
Awesome. Thank you. Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you. SEAC met last Tuesday. Thank you to Trustee Gray, who joined the SEAC trustees and the committee. I guess the bulk of our work focused on a review of the special education review. We had a chance as a committee to sort of review the aha moments of the learnings and had an opportunity to provide some changes and suggestions. And I believe our next steps are working on how we can best serve this demographic. So we'll be looking forward to, I think, picking up that work at our next meeting.
Thank you, Trustee Reynolds. Trustee Gerbentz.
Thank you, Chair Amos. The Inspire Subcommittee met last week, on April the 12th, and we looked at a lot of our procedures and reporting, and we have a lot of things that we're doing really well, we think, and there are a few things that we would like to tweak. So you'll be hearing from us again.
Thank you. Vice Chair Graves.
Thank you. At Committee of the Whole last week, we had preliminary overview of budget and how it's coming along. As you know, the specs came out a little bit later this year. Then we also had a presentation from some of our principals and our superintendents about what a day in their life is like, and the depth and the breadth of of what they have to manage on a day-to-day basis. So that was really informative. Next Committee of the Whole meeting will be the Program and Accommodation Review, and the two following will both be devoted to budget.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers to committee reports, we will move on to the director's report. Director Miller.
Thank you, Chair Amos. I'm going to turn the first part over to Superintendent Blackwell, who will talk about a stakeholder tool. community stakeholder too.
Thank you. Through the chair to trustees, I'd like to share with you a quick preview of the landing page for our community engagement tool. We had talked earlier at a previous board meeting, and Dasha just saw herself up there, Dasha and Zaid. You can actually play it and hear your voices as well. We talked previously around why we developed this tool, and we're really excited about being able to gather input and baseline data in our multi-year plan, which was helped develop by the Board of Trustees as well as board staff and input from parents and students. I'm going to ask Ryan if he could scroll down, and just around on the right-hand side, you'll see it gives a lot of information in terms of the timelines for the survey. We're in a soft launch right now. It is not live yet. We're just asking for feedback from our stakeholders. We are looking to launch the survey May 1st. Communications department is going to be part of that, and we're really excited about the look and the feel of the survey, and also providing opportunities to give feedback back to our stakeholders. We've worked really hard with the developer, and we're really excited about the fact that this really reflects some of the opportunities that we're providing for in the board, and that we're interested about hearing from our stakeholders.
Thanks, Superintendent Blackwell. The only other thing I have tonight is just a reminder, because I think it just so we know that it's around the Burlington PAR timelines again, in case the public's watching and people have forgotten or aren't aware. The director's report will be released publicly on April 21st, sometime after school. We're hoping 3:30-ish, 4 o'clock, when school has finished for the day. And that will go to the public on April 21st. Committee of the Whole would be April 26th. And for the public, when we put out the, I'm not sure the timing of this, I'd have to check, but we're also putting messaging out because there's obviously limited seating in here. It'll be a sign up to come in for the Committee of the Whole. 80 will be the maximum, plus press, or media that are allowed in. But we will have a spillover site at Robinson, and the entire thing will be streamed online so people can watch it at home. It's unfortunate that we have to limit seating, but we're limited by the seating. There's no choice around that. And so the entire Committee of the Whole on April 26th will be a discussion of the PAR and with the Board of Trustees, with all senior staff that are available. Superintendent Padre-Barrick, Manager of Planning Don Renzella, and myself will be doing the bulk of the kind of talking. And then May 8th will be the first public delegation evening. May 11th will be the second public delegation evening. And then the report will go to the board for action. Well, not actually action, but on May 17th for a first reading, for action on June 7th. I know that we are going to, on Friday, when we release the report, we're going to put out another statement about those dates as well, so people are aware. And a brief description of the process from there on in, that, this is the director's recommendation, the Board of Trustees will make the final decision, and this is how the process works from there. So we'll put that statement out on Friday along with the report. So I'm, in case there's any questions. Thank you. That's it for the director's report tonight.
It looks like there are a couple of questions. Trustee Collard.
Thank you. Since the request for delegations can now be submitted for the first night, at least anyway, I was wondering if we had a number that have already been submitted that could be reported to us.
19.
19 so far? Thank you.
I'm going to share that later, but.
Thank you, Chair Amos. To you, Director Miller. We are having another board meeting, a special board meeting on May the 31st. Do we know if any part of that agenda will include the PAR?
Through Chair Amos to Trustee Grebenz, yes, we know. No, it will not include the PAR. Yeah, May 31st will be budget and the other items, but that will not be an agenda item.
Thank you. Do you have anything else to report?
No.
Thank you. So we're now up to communications from the chair. So as you heard, that we already have 19 delegation requests as of 6:30 this evening. And that includes 4 who've already registered early for the May 11th, which actually can't be accepted, but they've been told they'll be put into the ones for the May 8th, or they can reapply at the date for the May 11th. So, and I believe this will change depending on what the actual recommendation is. So we will wait and see on Friday what happens. So, other items to share. I just got something from one of my principals, hot off the press. The Mustang boys basketball team won the Division A finals tonight at Burlington Central High School. They beat PL Robertson to become the Halton champions and bring the Corville Cup to Munns. So congratulations to them. Okay. I would also like to wish all those running for student trustee next week good luck. And to remind trustees that next week on Tuesday is the Give Respect, Get Respect assembly. And if you have a chance to go to that, it is an amazing event because you get to see some of great talent about anti-bullying message that is run for both boards with the police. And I believe that's it at the moment. So we will now move. Oh, and did you, Trustee Culler has a question for me, and then you can go.
Of the 19, I know that I have been advertising broadly that people should be as specific as possible about their submission when they submit, so that you don't get a whole bunch that just say PAR. Are you receiving more specific? Thank you. That's good to know. That's good to know.
And the vice chair and I are going to sit down and look at them when the deadline comes, so that if we have to get more information, we're going to have a message that will go out. And a couple of trustees have also requested they would like to have something in writing. So it only says may in the policy, but we're going to ask if they could to have something for us.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot one part in the director's report, and I may ask Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons to jump in, but I'd remiss if I didn't mention that Burlington Central were the champions in a robotics competition at McMaster. It's a fantastic achievement, and so congratulations to Burlington Central and the robotics team. It's a great program there. Do you have anything to add about that, Julie?
Just that they're currently scrambling to get themselves organized to depart for St. Louis for the World Championships.
That's awesome. Congratulations to them. Oh, one other thing I did want to mention is last week, Trustee Harvey Hope and I went to E.J. James and witnessed Canada 150 citizenship ceremony. 30 new Canadians were sworn in from 15 different countries. And if you ever have the opportunity to witness one of these events, it's very, very worthwhile. It makes you very proud to be Canadian. Both Trustee Harvey Hope and I have, as well as Superintendent Salmini, have now reaffirmed our allegiance to Canada a couple times, and we'll continue to as many times as we can. So just wanted to share that as well. All right, so we're now up to trustee comments. Just a minute. I'm going to erase you because I have to. Now you can do it again. Trustee questions and comments. Trustee Daniele.
Thank you. I also was privileged to be a part of a citizenship ceremony at Brookville School, and it was beyond amazing. My favorite line was when the justice said to the new Canadians that we may not share a past, but we all share in the same opportunities for the future, and that meant a lot to me. But I also wanted to take a moment and congratulate Milton District High School's Lori Graham. She has been the driving force behind the improv team for many years, and she has recently been honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Canadian Improv Games. And it's really nice to see somebody who puts that much time, that much dedication into supporting her kids' creativity be recognized for that. So I just wanted to congratulate her.
That's wonderful. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. The last couple of weeks were quite exciting in Oakville Ward 4, starting with a presentation by grade 2 students who created a business selling cards, created a business of greeting cards, carrying cards by kids with the guidance of their special education teacher, Miss Elmer. Secondly, we had our Super Council meeting, and the topic of discussion was breakfast program or breakfast club, sponsored by Halton Food for Thought. There's great interest by a number of schools in offering breakfast program in their school to all the students, and so we'll be working with Halton Food for Thought in trying to expand into those schools. And last but not least, I had the immense pleasure of presenting the Inspire Award to an EA at Abbey Lane Public School, Miss Budgel. The presentation took place in her grade 3 class, and it was a really exciting and fun time, and the kids were certainly very happy and appreciative for their EA to receive the award. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Gerbents.
Thank you, Chair Amos. I had the pleasure of going up to Kilbride Public School on April the 7th to be part of an event that included Councillor John Taylor from Burlington. The City of Burlington was delegated by students up at Kilbride because they would like a skate park in the area. It's way too far to head down to the Burlington skate parks, and the city is approached the school and had all of the students in an assembly to help figure out what kind of skate features they would like in their park. And it was very well run, and the kids are very enthusiastic about the possibilities.
Thank you. Trustee Gray.
Thank you very much. I know that the grade 4 classes in Halton Hills will be busy in the next 2 days, as they've all been invited to attend the Safe at Home in the Halton Hills. It's a show that is put on in the local arenas, and it features 2 stadiums filled with different interactive safety exhibits. And I know all of our school tours for the children and their parents will revolve around school safety and bicycling. So kudos to the Chamber of Commerce for putting on this program and permitting our students to attend this wonderful safety exhibits and interactive show at no charge. So thank you very much. And that takes place over to the public at large Friday and Saturday at no cost to get in. So everyone's invited to attend that at the Mold Masters Arena in Georgetown.
Thank you. Trustee Collard.
Thank you. I just wanted to reference a letter that all trustees and the director received earlier this week regarding the municipal elections for 2018 and the desire of the municipalities for us to schedule a professional activity day on the election day to allow for the smooth running of the elections. And I know that we had a meeting with representatives from the City of Burlington in the past regarding this. I was wondering if you would care to comment on it. There's been a request also for a meeting to be scheduled, and wondering what your thoughts are on this.
Through you, Chair Amos, to Trustee Collard and all trustees, thank you for the question. I'm going to turn it over to Associate Director Bogue in a second, as he is the chair of the Calendar Committee. As you know, all boards have a Calendar Committee, and we have one, and the Calendar Committee works with all the stakeholders, community, our unions, our federations, and school administrators, parents, to look at the calendar that is recommended by the Ministry of Ed. And then there's some flexibility around where PA days and PD days are situated in that calendar. And the calendar committee has significant input into where those PA and PD days are placed. And then, of course, the calendar is brought to the Board of Trustees for approval. So I just wanted to give a little background to the process in case there's people watching and so on. It is an operational issue. We respect the request, and whether we can agree to the request is another thing altogether. But I'll turn it over to Associate Director Bogue.
Thanks, Director Miller. We did have some conversation about that today at School Ops, actually. There are some pros and cons to having the election on a day when kids are in school, because kids get to see democracy in action. That's the pro, but the con is all the organizational pieces and a lot of strangers actually in the building. And so there are some advantages for the PA day as well. The family school superintendents were kind of thinking that it probably does make sense to have it on the PA day if all folks are kind of in alignment on or in agreement on that issue. So as Director Miller states, that would have to go to the calendar committee. We'd also want to talk to the Catholic board because, as you know, we try to align our PA days with our coterminous board as well. So I think next steps would be for us to talk to the folks at our coterminous board, see if they're in agreement. If people are, we'd tentatively write the municipalities to say we've got tentative agreement, but we've got to go through the calendar committee still.
Thank you. Vice Chair Graves.
Thank you. I had the privilege last week of attending the HEDA Annual Appreciation Dinner. Halton District Educational Assistants Association. It's a fabulous group of people who, as you know, work with our most vulnerable students. And it was very clear that they're dedicated to their students and active within their association. Many were given 10, 15, 20, 25, and yes, even 30 years of service awards. And a number were recognized for volunteering, and they also awarded their annual You Make a Difference award. As is their tradition, funds were raised and they donate every year to a local charity. And this year it was the Learning Disabilities Association of Halton. So overall it was a very inspiring evening to attend.
Thank you. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. This actually pertains to the earlier item about using schools for elections. And actually, Associate Director Bogue addressed the 2 points that I wanted to kind of remind us about, because we did have a discussion about this at the table here around the pros and cons. The biggest pro, of course, being for our youth to be able to be part of and witness the election process at play. I do appreciate the safety concerns, and I'm wondering if maybe we could consider using secondary schools as the facilities, because typically I think we use just the elementary schools. With the secondary schools, that actually brings the youth even that much closer to election process, as they themselves will be coming of age shortly and be eligible to vote themselves. Thank you.
Director Miller.
Through Chair Amos to Trustee Oliver, we don't pick the schools. They're picked for us, and that's true of provincial and federal elections as well. So they don't come to us and say, which schools would you like? They tell us which schools to go to you, because they're based on the ward. Like in municipal elections, they're based on where the wards are and all those other things. And in provincial and federal elections, they're based on the density and that. So we're really, I'm looking at Superintendent Cullen, who's quite familiar with it. We've never, as far as I'm aware, ever even been asked. We've just been told. So, Jerry, yeah.
Through the chair, that was the case. We've recently been able to get a little bit of an audience prior to the actual selection. So the returning officers that are actually setting up the polling stations now contact us ahead of time, and we'll review the sites. We've had lots of conversations about that and meeting with the principals about what may or may not be able to happen on a particular site. But the director's absolutely correct. It's really a question of numbers and locations, and accessibility is a very big element that they're concerned about for parking and getting in the building and all of those. So they have quite a list of criteria, and I think they've got sites that they're comfortable with that have worked in the past, so they tend to return to them. So there's some effort required to move them to other locations. But we can certainly have those conversations and have had them.
Director Miller.
Thank you, Chair Amos. And I just have a comment about this. And obviously, Associate Director Bogan and the Calendar Committee run this process, and I would not impose my own views at all. But I am concerned that there's a move to not have this happen. Municipal elections there's not tremendous voter turnout at times, and I think symbolically we're telling kids that it's now a holiday. So, you know, my personal view, democracy is extremely important, and any chance we get to express democracy and demonstrate to children that we're expressing democracy is a significant thing. But I certainly would not go against what our school operations say or impose. I think the calendar committee itself. But I think it's important that people know where the director stands, and I believe strongly that the safety considerations can be mitigated and have been mitigated over all these years. And the symbolic message of having children witness people using their rights. It's ironic because tonight we've had 2 trustees talk about being at citizenship celebrations, I guess, ceremonies, and now we won't have the kids exposed to people voting in municipal elections, or possibly. So, people may take, but I just thought it was important. People are my personal viewpoint. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before we go to Trustee L. Harrison, for those who are interested in the hockey playoffs, Washington Capitals are beating the Toronto Maple Leafs right now 4-2 at the end of the second. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you very much, Chair Amos. I just wanted to mention that last week, Chair Amos and I had the pleasure with a number of local Toastmasters of judging the annual speech competition. And the topics ranged from strange laws I can break in Canada to social implications of consuming chocolate and many personal and touching reflections and stories. And the talent was certainly evident, but not only the talent, the passion in the topics about which they were speaking. So it was great to do that. Last night I attended, for part of it, the Innovators Cafe, and again talk about a room full of talent, staff from around the board getting together to share the innovative ideas and processes that they are undertaking, experiments that they're doing, fun that they're having, and the learning. It was really great, and thanks to Superintendent Newton and the group for leading that charge. And then lastly, Chair Amos, you scooped me there. I was going to say go Leafs, go Raptors, and go Jays.
You weren't going to say it.
Thank you, Trustee L. Harrison. And I believe it's back to the director.
Yeah. Turn it over to Superintendent Pennyfather, because he was an MC at a great event.
Last week we had the Halton Showcase. It's a long tradition in Halton, and for years I've wanted to MC it, and they let me this year, so I was very excited about that. And very cool being backstage and everything, and the big sonic treat was 700 kids singing together at the very end. If you look on my Twitter feed, you can actually hear them. There's a little 10-second clip. And kudos to the group of music teachers that we have in this board that put that on. It is quite amazing. There's over 1,000 student musicians performing in one night, and they get them on and off the stage, and the performances are excellent. It's an incredible night, and kudos to the Halton District School Board for having designated music teachers, and it shows. So it was a great night all around.
But did they let you play your drums?
No. Next year, maybe.
Thank you very much for your report. And seeing no further items or speakers, can I have a motion to adjourn? Trustee Gray, seconded by Trustee Pappen. Just a minute, I got to get to the right spot. All those in favor? Yeah, and it's before 9 o'clock. Still.
That's why the press.
It's weird. All right, I'll just end it. Try one more time. You look at, this is a weird screen too. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much and good night. Because she couldn't.
You might want